Hi, my name is Tracy Truax, and this is my presentation on project-based versus problem-based learning. The goals for this presentation are to articulate the similarities and differences between project-based and problem-based learning. I'm going to do that by first kind of talking about the similarities and then illustrating the differences by showing how each format can be used for a specific learning target. So why use problem or project-based learning in the classroom? This is my favorite quote, I think, to illustrate why it's such a good tool to use with students. Gonzalez says that it is a systematic teaching method that engages students in learning, knowledge, and skills through extended inquiry process structure around complex, authentic questions and carefully designed products and tasks. And I think probably my favorite part of PBL is that authenticity. And there's a lot of similarities between the models. Both of the models encourage 21st century skills, which include critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity, those four C's. Both models are student-centered. Both models ask students to consider real-world problems for which they need to come up with a solution, a viable solution. And again, getting back to that authentic learning, these are not fake problems. They're not problems that students are not interested in. And usually they're really, really engaging. And this engagement leads to increased motivation and learning. So both models also actually start with a student learning goal in mind. And so now I want to talk about my specific example and my specific learning targets. This is a AP College Board Human Geography learning target from the agriculture unit. The target says explain the challenges and debates relating to the changing nature of contemporary agriculture and food production practices. Just recently, our class went through a course cleanup, I guess, where they incorporated a lot of skills too. So now skills are going to be sort of like a central focus in the class. So the skill that correlates with this particular learning target is to compare patterns and trends and sources to draw conclusions, which is just perfect for this either project-based or problem-based learning, because it's up to the students to do the research and engage in the inquiry. And that's a skill that they need anyway for my class. And so it kind of lines up really well. Also, one of the things that I came across that I think is imperative for teachers who want to try this is that this is not the only way that students actually learn. So in order, and maybe this is especially true for my class, but in order for students to really engage meaningfully in these real world topics, it's important that content and standards, concepts, and in-depth understandings um, of the topics and concepts happens prior to the actual project itself. So I don't think my students could do either one of these projects without having the knowledge of agricultural practices and food production and contemporary agricultural concepts. They just wouldn't have enough knowledge to create anything that I think would be really meaningful for their learning. So this learning target actually happens at the end of the unit. It's the second to last learning target, and so kids really do have a lot of information going into this project or problem. So I'm going to start with problem-based learning, and it seems to me that problem-based learning is much more focused. A little less student choice on what they're actually researching. All students are given the same question, and then they have to sort of figure out the answer through extended inquiry. And then the end result, and I'll share this on the next slide, all students can come up with like a different solution, but really they're all using the same end of product assessment too. So I like the ill-structured problem to mimic the real world. I think is a really interesting way of thinking about it. So here's my problem. In the United States, 40% of food grown or raised is not eaten. It's a pretty shocking statistic, especially when you consider that nearly 1 in 6 Americans is food insecure, and that 25% of all fresh water and 300 million barrels of oil are used to produce the food that is wasted every single year. The vast majority of waste, 95%, ends up in landfills where its value is lost forever. This waste occurs all along the food chain from farm to fork. This is a problem that needs to be addressed. What can you do to reduce the amount of food waste in your community? So that final question is the actual problem. And then the scenario that I presented prior is actually statistics that are true and factual here in the United States. And I wanted to keep students very local, so they're focusing on St. Charles, which is where I'm from, the community of St. Charles, or and I was kind of thinking about this as I was structuring this question. It might be interesting to look at the school community too. So I'm sort of on the fence whether it's like the whole city or maybe it's just the school community. And then the culminating activity, again, the students are told what they have to do, but then they get to have, they get to create what they present. So their culminating activity for this problem-based learning question is to create a list of recommendations and or ideas for how to deal with food waste within your community to present to a local government official. Now, in a perfect world, I would love to bring somebody into class that was actually a local government official and have the students present their recommendations to somebody who is actually has power to deal with this as an issue. And so that could be like a really cool way to invite our community to see what's happening into our classrooms and to see the good work that our students are doing. And then if I did want to keep it like school community, I would probably ask the principals or assistant principals to come in and hear a list of recommendations for how we can reduce food waste at our high school. And so in either case, what I think is really interesting about these, actually both of them, is making your work public. And so it's not just a presentation to your classmates, but it's actually a presentation that could affect real change. And I'll get to the change part a little bit later. So project-based learning to me feels a little bit more open-ended and provides students with a little bit more choice on what it is that they can potentially research and share with their communities. So this is an ill-defined task. So they have some options on how to present their learning, and they also have some options on how to research what it is that they want to research. And so it's a little bit more choice, I think, is involved with project-based rather than problem-based. So our project is, again, based upon a real world question problem. Students still have to come up with a solution in some way. So here's what we're doing in class. So it says, what should we know about the food that we eat? Many consumers do not understand the complicated and sometimes unethical process of food production in the United States. It's our job to educate our community about the choices we make as consumers, how the choices we make as consumers can have a positive impact on our food. In what ways can we be more ethically responsible as it relates to the food we choose to eat? Now, what's really important in this, in sort of understanding this project, is that again, students have already learned about the food production process here in the United States. I mean, they've tackled things like GMOs and sustainability and local food movements uh, like local food movements like buy local or organic farming or fair trade. They learned about access, food access, I should say, or lack thereof in some cases. They've learned about food deserts. They've learned about factory farming. They've learned about huge multinational corporations that control a lot of what it is that we consume. And so they have a lot of options from which to draw that they might um, choose to learn a little bit more about, but more importantly, they get to decide what they think is most important for students in our community to know about the food that they eat, about the choices that we make every day without even realizing that we're making choices. And it's up to them to design their additional inquiry questions like, what is it about this particular topic that you think students and our community should know more about? What is it that you want to share with them? And then I kind of go over some of the other steps here. And so they just have a lot of choice. So with project-based learning, there are steps that you have to take. And I think the audience is important in both of these, but in project-based learning, the audience is, again, it's like one of the steps. So who is the audience? In our case, it's East High School students and community members invited by students who are doing the presentations. A lot of times this just means that they invite their parents, but that's also pretty cool. And again, I sort of mentioned this before, there's an inquiry aspect where students choose a topic to research. They have to design additional research questions. They design their projects so they can choose how they want to display their learning. They don't create their projects yet because before the creation, we'll engage in something called critical friends where they'll present their design and what they're thinking about for feedback. So the students will get feedback from their peers on how to, like things that their peers really like about their project, or how can we, some feedback for improvement. And then once we go through that process, the product is created. And they don't just, in this particular case, create like an information product. So, I mean, maybe it's a trifold board, maybe it's a video or whatever it is that they want to make. They also have to create a call to action pamphlet. So I call it a takeaway. So they have to provide to their audience like something that the audience members can take away after they've learned about a specific topic. Now what? Now what can you do next? Then they present the project. We have a food fair where we take over the entire library, and they present their projects in sort of a, I don't know, it's almost like a museum style, like people just kind of walk around and pause and listen to their presentations. And then there's a reflection on the process. So what did you gain from this process? What worked well? What didn't work well? And in both cases, like project-based and problem-based, students are required to collaborate with one another. So part of the reflection project process could be, how well did you collaborate with your peers, and so on and so forth. Now, how PBL impacts students is maybe my favorite part of this whole thing. I think it's really a wonderful idea to give students voice on issues that really matter to them and to our community, to give students agency to affect real change. Like the kids are actually able to see that what we do in class is meaningful, and then they can take that knowledge and apply it to have a positive impact on the world, which I think is pretty awesome, especially as a geography teacher. So that's PBL, project-based and problem-based, and here are my references.